Welcome to this episode of Dev Questions with Tim Corey. Join us as we tackle the questions you are asking about a career in software development, understanding the industry, and new technology. Now, here's your host, expert developer, and online educator, Tim Corey.
How do I integrate into a remote team? How do I build healthy relationships when everyone is remote? This is a question that Steven asked recently, and I thought it'd be a great one to answer on Dev Questions. So, what do you do when you don't actually sit down with your coworkers across a table or in a cubicle or something else? What if you only ever work remotely? Now, I've done this a number of times in my career to a greater or lesser extent. One of the jobs I held more recently before I did full-time doing this, I spent about 4 years working remote only. And for the first 9 months, I never even met my coworkers. We talked over audio only, but that was about it. And in fact, my mother was a little concerned that I was working for scarier random people on the internet, wasn't sure it was a real job or not. I said, well, checks keep coming, so I think we're good. But it's a question, right? And it's becoming more of a question because of the fact that more and more jobs that can are going remote only. So how do you integrate into a team? It's not the same as hanging out at the water cooler and talking, sitting down at a lunch table and having a conversation, because you don't really do that with your coworkers remotely. So let's talk through some ways that you can integrate into a team and make sure that you're really starting to fit in with that organization. And the first one is going to be one that people often question about. So let's talk through it. So don't jump all over it yet. Let's talk through it. The first one is work hard. And this is one where it can be misconstrued what I mean. I don't mean work 80 hours a week. I don't mean break yourself trying to prove yourself as a developer. But at the same time, it's important that when you are working remotely, that you are obviously working. It's never a good thing to hire a new employee or see a new coworker start, and then you can never get a hold of them during the day. And you start asking that question, are they working or are they taking time off? Are they just kind of slacking off? Do they have one of those mouse mats that make sure they look online, but they're never actually online? Make sure that you are present. Make sure you are reachable. Make sure that during the workday that you are seen as visible. That way you can help reassure your coworkers. And yes, in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to. In a perfect world, trust is extended day one and you just become part of the team. It's just not how it is in most organizations. Trust is usually earned. So earn that trust. Spend that time. Make sure you're intentional about being available. Make sure you're intentional about communicating what you're doing. When you are remote, you have to over-communicate things a bit. Because when we're talking face-to-face, I can see your eyes. I can see the facial expressions you make. I can see your body language. These are not things that you normally see on a remote team. Sure, you can watch a camera and see a person's face, and that can be helpful, but it's not everything. So communicating clearly what you're doing, communicating where you are and how you're working is important, especially up front. Let people get to know who you are and your work ethic before you start taking time off and really could be perceived as slacking off. Once people trust you, then you can do things like, hey, you know what? I've got a doctor's appointment at 2 in the afternoon. I'm gonna go do that. I'll be back on tonight. Or I'm just taking that time off. That can be definitely a valid and beneficial part of being a work from home person. But you gotta be careful to establish that trust as well, making sure everyone knows what's going on. Don't just disappear. Tell people, make sure it's a status. Hey, I'm out from 2 to 4 at the doctor's, I'll return. Okay? Make sure that you set up that clear and over communication with your coworkers. All right? The other thing is I want you to show progress. When you're working on something, it's easy to work on it for a week and nothing happens, or it seems like nothing happens. Instead, check in if you're working with a boss and the boss assigned you an assignment, then check in and say, here's how far I've made it. Make sure that they know the progress you're making. If you get stuck somewhere, don't get stuck for too long. Ask for help. Say, hey, I'm working on this. I got to this point and I'm stuck on something. Is there a way you can help me? Make sure that they know you're making progress and working on something. Again, these come back to the idea of showing that you are a hard worker, showing that you do honor your boss and your commitment to working for the company, and that you are putting in the time necessary to get the job done. Again, within the scope of your job, don't try and abuse yourself to make a good impression. All right? Now, the next one is I want you to try and get to know your coworkers. This can be simple or it can be difficult, but try to take a little bit of time. Let's say you meet with a coworker one-on-one about a question you had. At the end of it, maybe just say, hey, what do you do for fun? Try to find something that's positive in their life that they do that maybe you could meet them in the middle on. Maybe they like baseball. And you say, hey, you know what? I love the Mets. And they're like, well, I'm a Braves fan. Okay, now you have something to talk about. Sure, they're rival teams. And sure, there'll be a little bit of competition there, but keep it friendly. And now you have a bonding moment. Maybe you hate baseball. That's okay. You can still say, hey, you know what? I heard the Braves won last night. And have them explain. Sure, it's not your thing. That's okay. It can be their thing. Bond over something. Build up a bit of a rapport with them when it comes to talking over a subject they like. Next up, find out what else they might like. Whether it is, hey, you like to work late? Cool. You like to work early? Gotcha. Start to figure out their habits and patterns. And then be conscious of that when you're working. Say, hey, you know what? I know you like to work early in the morning as opposed to, late at night. I need to get together with you. Can we do that at 10 a.m.? Okay. Be thinking about them, not just about yourself, and what works best for their schedule. So you know their desires, know what they like, know how they like to work, and you try to work within that. Build that relationship where you are showing that you value them as a coworker. That will help them want to value you as a coworker. This is one that I struggle with, and that is avoid sarcasm. With my friends, I can be very sarcastic. And it's often a temptation to treat my people I've known a little bit as my friends. And so if I'm not careful, I get a little sarcastic or I make a comment or two. And if you're not careful, that can go over very poorly. It can be perceived as spiteful or mean as opposed to joking. It doesn't really come across well, especially not in written form. So be very careful of things like that. Don't go negative. Don't go sarcastic. Try to be positive, encouraging, and upbeat. If you make a joke, try not to make it at your coworker's expense or in a way that could be perceived as negative. I know it's difficult, but again, you're not sitting across from the person. They can't see your body language. They can't see the smile on your face as opposed to the frown on your face. So they might interpret the wrong way. So be careful of that. And the final one that will help you build a relationship with your coworkers and build a relationship in the organization is see if you can do something outside of work. Now, I know that with remote only, you're probably not in the same city or even the same region. That can be okay. You can still do things outside of work in certain circumstances. For instance, again, if you both like baseball, maybe the Mets play the Braves. They do quite a bit. Well, then schedule a time and say, hey, are you going to watch the game on Thursday? I'm going to jump on the chat. We can chat back and forth while you watch the game together. So you're in two different regions. You're watching the same game and talking back and forth about it. Okay, maybe it is an esport. Maybe you like to play Rocket League. Well, the two you can get together and play Rocket League together or against each other. Try these things out. Maybe it's more, a different game or something like that where you can share something outside of just work. Maybe you compete over the Wordle and who can have a better number of lines. Okay, whatever it is, try and find something outside of just your job that you can engage with your coworkers on. That way, you start to see each other as humans and not just as robots that pump out code. Okay, try to build that relationship like you would at the office, but from a remote distance. It does take some work. It's not going to be easy. It might be slower, but try to be that positive, encouraging, hardworking person who genuinely cares about their coworkers. Doing so will really help them feel comfortable with you. Okay? So those are my thoughts. It can be a lot of work, but it definitely can be done. All right? So hopefully that answered your question, Stephen. If you have a question, go to suggestions.IAmTimCorey.com, leave that suggestion, and mark it as dev question if it will fit in this format. Otherwise, there's other things like courses or 10-minute training videos or others that you could mark it as well and see it answered in a future dev question or see it answered in another form. All right, thanks for listening. And as always, I am Tim Corey.